How has your day been so far? Hello, we're AETA Stories, and today we're sharing a brand new original story with you.
Marina Collins stood in the small bathroom of their apartment, the overhead light humming softly above her. It was still early, the kind of early that pressed against the eyes and made the body resist movement, but the day had already begun without her permission. She leaned closer to the mirror and studied her reflection as if it belonged to someone else. The woman staring back looked tired in a way sleep could no longer fix. Fine lines traced the corners of her eyes, deeper than she remembered. At her temples, strands of gray had begun to show, no matter how carefully she tried to hide them. She was 38. The number felt unreal, almost dishonest, because the face in the mirror looked older. Not dramatically so, not in a way strangers would notice immediately, but enough that Marina did. Enough that she felt it in her chest, heavy and quiet, like a truth she had been avoiding. She pressed her lips together and exhaled slowly. Years of rushing, worrying, stretching every dollar, and holding herself together had left their mark. The mirror did not judge her. It simply remembered everything. A knock sounded on the door. A small, impatient one. Someone needed something already. "Mom, hurry up!" Vera's voice came through the thin wood, sharp and annoyed. "Natalie needs the bathroom." Marina glanced at the clock above the sink. They were already behind. She rinsed her toothbrush, wiped the counter without really cleaning it, and opened the door. Vera pushed past her without waiting, pulling Natalie along by the hand. Marina caught her balance against the doorframe and said nothing. There was no time for it and no energy. The morning moved the way it always did, fast and uneven. Bowls were set on the table, milk poured. Jackets searched for and found at the last possible second. Anthony sat quietly, spooning cereal into his mouth, eyes flicking between his mother and his sister. Natalie climbed onto her chair and swung her legs, humming to herself. Vera stood apart from them all, scrolling through her phone, her expression fixed in a practiced look of disapproval. "You're wearing that again," Vera said suddenly, glancing at Marina's sweater. "It's so worn. Don't you ever buy anything new?" Marina felt the words before she understood them, a small tightening in her stomach. "It's clean," she said evenly, "and we're leaving in 10 minutes. Vera snorted. "Clean isn't the same as decent. No wonder everyone at school thinks we're broke." Anthony's spoon paused midair. Natalie looked up, confused, her brows knitting together. Marina reached for a mug and wrapped both hands around it, though the coffee inside had already gone lukewarm. "We have everything we need," Marina said. "Food, a place to live, a tiny place," Vera cut in, "with one bedroom for me and Anthony. And you expect me to be grateful." Marina opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had learned, over time, which arguments led nowhere. This was one of them. Vera's eyes flicked over her, lingering on her face, her hair pulled back without effort or care. "You should at least try," Vera added. "Other moms do. They work better jobs. They look better. They don't embarrass their kids." The words landed cleanly, deliberately. Marina felt them settle, heavy and familiar. Shame rose quickly, followed by a tired kind of anger that had nowhere to go. She thought of the alarm clock that rang too early every day, the hours on her feet, the bills stacked neatly in a drawer because chaos needed order somewhere. She thought of how little space there was in her life for anything that did not directly serve survival. Anthony shifted in his seat. "Vera," he said quietly, but she ignored him. Natalie reached for Marina's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, as if trying to make things normal again. Marina placed a hand over her daughter's small fingers and nodded. "Finish your breakfast," she said. Her voice sounded steady, though she felt anything but. She did not look at Vera again. If she did, she knew she might say something she could not take back. As they gathered their things, Marina caught her reflection once more in the hallway mirror. Not just the lines or the gray this time, but the slump of her shoulders, the way she seemed to shrink without meaning to. She wondered when she had started measuring herself only by what she lacked, by what she had failed to give. The door closed behind them, the cold morning air rushing in. Another day was waiting, and Marina stepped into it carrying the quiet weight of exhaustion, guilt, and the persistent feeling that she was never quite enough, neither as a woman nor as a mother. They rushed out the door with the familiar sense of being late before the day had properly begun. Marina locked the apartment, her keys cold against her fingers, and herded the children down the narrow stairs. The air outside was sharp, the kind of cold that stung the lungs on the first breath. Snow drifted lightly from a pale gray sky, thin flakes settling on coats and hair before melting away. The car coughed when Marina turned the key, then started on the second try. She let out a quiet breath of relief and pulled away from the curb. The heater took its time warming up, blowing air that was barely more than cool. Natalie rubbed her hands together in the back seat. Anthony stared out the window, tracing shapes in the fog on the glass. Vera sat rigid in the front passenger seat, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "This thing sounds like it's about to fall apart," she said, glancing at the dashboard with open disdain. "I can't believe you still drive this." "It gets us where we need to go," Marina replied, keeping her eyes on the road. "Barely," Vera shot back. "Everyone else's parents have decent cars. Not this junk." Anthony turned toward his sister. "It's fine," he said. "It works." Vera laughed sharply. "Of course you'd say that. You don't care what people think." Marina's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Snow lined the edges of the street, and traffic moved slowly, cautiously. She focused on maintaining a steady speed, on not reacting. "You know," Vera continued, her voice growing louder, more confident with each word. "If you'd made better choices, we wouldn't be living like this. A tiny apartment, a car that barely starts, no money for anything. It's embarrassing." Marina felt heat rise to her face. "That's enough," she said quietly. Vera ignored her. "My friends' moms don't work dead-end jobs. They didn't end up stuck like this. You had your chances." Anthony shrank back in his seat. Natalie leaned closer to him, sensing the shift in the air, her small face tense and uncertain. "Vera," Marina said, her voice tighter now. "Stop." Snowflakes thickened, swirling across the windshield. Marina turned on the wipers, their steady rhythm doing nothing to calm her thoughts. Years of restraint pressed against her chest, every unspoken word lining up at once. "You don't even try," Vera added. "You just accept this life and expect us to be grateful for it." Something inside Marina snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough that it startled her. She pulled the car over to the side of the road, tires crunching against the snow-dusted curb. For a moment, no one spoke. The engine idled. The heater hummed. "Get out," Marina said. Vera stared at her, stunned. "What?" "Get out of the car," Marina repeated, her voice shaking despite herself. "Take the bus to school." "You're kidding," Vera said, disbelief turning quickly into anger. "It's freezing." "You wanted to be independent," Marina said. Her words felt unreal even as she spoke them. "This is what it looks like." Vera yanked open the door. Cold air rushed in, sharp and unforgiving. She grabbed her backpack and slammed the door behind her with enough force to rattle the car. She didn't look back. She just started walking, her shoulders stiff, her steps fast and furious. Anthony gasped, "Mom." Natalie's lip trembled. "Why is Vera getting out?" Marina stared ahead, her heart pounding hard enough to make her dizzy. She wanted to call Vera back, to undo what she had just done, but the moment had already passed. Pride, anger, exhaustion, all of it held her in place. "She'll take the bus," Marina said finally. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Anthony fell silent, his hands clenched in his lap. Natalie began to cry softly. Confused and frightened, Marina pulled back into traffic. The road stretched ahead, pale and unfamiliar. With every mile, the weight of what she had done settled deeper. She felt shaken, ashamed, and strangely numb. Whatever fragile thread had held her and her eldest daughter together that morning had snapped, and there was no way to gather it back. By the time Marina reached the hotel, the morning already felt like it belonged to another lifetime. Her hands were stiff from the cold as she pushed through the staff entrance. The familiar smell of disinfectant and brewed coffee wrapping around her like a uniform she could never take off. She changed quickly, smoothed her hair with damp fingers, and stepped behind the front desk just as the lobby began to stir. The hotel was small, practical, and unforgiving. There was no room for mistakes here. Schedules were tight, expectations rigid, and every minute accounted for. Marina knew the rules by heart. No late arrivals, no missed details, no excuses. Her paycheck depended on it. More than that, her children did. She forced herself into motion, greeting guests, answering questions, checking reservations. Her body went through the routine automatically, but her mind lagged behind, heavy and unfocused. The image of Vera walking away in the snow kept intruding, sharp and unwelcome. Marina pushed it down and kept working. Midday brought the problem she had been warned about, but failed to track closely enough. A guest from one of the rooms had not checked out on time. The room sat occupied well past the agreed hour, blocking the next reservation. Marina realized it too late, just as her supervisor approached the desk with a tight expression. "This should have been handled already," the woman said, glancing at the clock. Her tone was flat, practiced. "You know the policy." Marina nodded, her throat dry. "I'll take care of it right now." The guest argued, insisting the delay was minor, unavoidable. By the time the situation was resolved, the damage was done. The room turnover was late. Paperwork followed. A formal note was added to Marina's file. At the end of it all, she was informed that the lost hours would be deducted from her pay. It wasn't a large amount by most standards, but Marina felt it like a blow. That money already had a place. Groceries, gas, something small she had promised Natalie. She signed the acknowledgement without protest. There was no point. Protesting only marked you as difficult. The rest of the shift stretched endlessly. Marina smiled when required, apologized when expected, and kept her head down. Her feet ached. Her head throbbed. Every hour felt heavier than the last. By the time she clocked out, the sky outside had darkened, the snow thickening on the sidewalks. She drove home slowly, her thoughts racing ahead of her. Vera should have been back by now. She would be sulking, no doubt, but home. Marina told herself this again and again, gripping the steering wheel as if it could keep her steady. The apartment was quiet when she opened the door. Too quiet. Anthony sat at the table, his homework spread out but untouched. Natalie was curled on the couch, half asleep, her shoes still on. "Where's your sister?" Marina asked, dropping her bag. Anthony shook his head. "She didn't come back." "She didn't." Marina checked the time. Her pulse quickened. "Are you sure?" "She took her bag," he said. "The brown one." Marina froze. A bag meant intention. A bag meant planning. She pulled out her phone and dialed Vera's number. It rang until it didn't. She tried again. And again. Each unanswered call tightened something in her chest. Natalie stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Mom," she whispered, "is Vera coming back?" "I don't know," Marina said honestly. The words tasted wrong. At last her phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen, short and merciless. "Don't look for me." That was all. Marina sank into the nearest chair, the room tilting slightly around her. Exhaustion gave way to panic, sharp and immediate. her mind filled with questions she couldn't answer, fears she didn't want to name. The weight she carried every day, provider, protector, parent, pressed down harder than ever. For the first time, Marina felt truly afraid that everything she was holding together might finally collapse. The hours crawled by with cruel slowness. Night settled in fully, and the snow outside the apartment window thickened, soft at first and then relentless, coating the streetlights in a dull white haze. Marina moved through the apartment without purpose, straightening things that were already straight, checking the lock on the door more than once. Every few minutes, she glanced at her phone, willing it to light up. It didn't. Anthony tried to act normal, but his eyes followed Marina wherever she went. Natalie kept asking when Vera would come home, her voice growing smaller each time. Marina answered with vague reassurances she did not believe herself. By 10 o'clock, she had stopped pretending. She called Vera again. No answer. She texted. Nothing. She paced the living room, her thoughts spiraling into places she tried desperately to avoid. Snow meant cold. Cold meant danger. Vera had stormed off that morning in sneakers, angry and careless. Marina pictured her waiting at a bus stop too long, or getting into a car she shouldn't, or deciding she didn't need to come back at all. She opened her phone and searched for the non-emergency police number. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Calling would mean paperwork, questions, possibly Child Protective Services. It would mean admitting that she had lost control, that she had told her daughter to get out of the car. Marina closed the phone and set it down. Not yet, she told herself. Give it one more hour. Vera was 16. Stubborn, dramatic. She would come home once she cooled off. Midnight passed. Then 1. The snow kept falling. Marina barely slept. When she did, her dreams were sharp and fractured. Vera's face disappearing into crowds, her name echoing down empty streets. She woke before the alarm, her chest tight, her mouth dry. Morning light crept through the blinds, pale and unconvincing. There was still no message. She got the younger children ready in silence. Anthony noticed. He didn't say anything, but his movements were careful, as if afraid to make things worse. Natalie clung to Marina's coat longer than usual before daycare, her small arms tight around her waist. At home again, Marina stood in the kitchen and stared at the clock. The seconds ticked by too loudly. She told herself she needed information, something solid to hold on to. She picked up the phone and called the school. The secretary recognized Vera's name immediately. There was a pause on the line, then a quieter voice. Marina was transferred. Mrs. Collins, the counselor said gently, we've been trying to reach you. Marina's stomach dropped. Is Vera there? No, the woman replied. She hasn't been in school for several days now. Several days. The words echoed, heavy and unreal. I thought she was sick, Marina said weakly, though she knew how unconvincing it sounded. The counselor didn't push. I understand this is difficult, she said, but unexcused absences are serious. At this point, we're required to document truancy. If it continues, there could be legal involvement. Marina closed her eyes. Legal involvement meant reports, visits, scrutiny. It meant strangers deciding whether she was a fit mother. I'll find her, Marina said quickly. She'll be back. I hope so, the counselor replied, her tone kind but firm. Please keep us informed. The call ended, leaving Marina alone with the truth she had been avoiding. This wasn't a single bad morning or a dramatic gesture meant to prove a point. Vera hadn't just skipped school. She had left, intentionally, with enough resolve to stay gone overnight, and then another. Marina sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Guilt rose first, sharp and immediate. She replayed the moment on the side of the road again and again, wishing she had swallowed her anger, wishing she had said anything else. Fear followed close behind. Not the abstract fear of punishment or judgment, but the deeper, more terrifying realization that she might not be able to protect her child simply by loving her. That love, on its own, might not be enough to bring Vera home. For the first time, Marina allowed herself the thought she had been pushing away since the night before. Her daughter was gone, and she didn't know how to get her back. As Marina sat alone in the quiet apartment, waiting for a phone call that never came, her thoughts drifted backward to a time when her life had felt stable, even hopeful, before exhaustion became her constant companion, before every decision felt like a calculation made under pressure. She had met Victor Collins more than a decade earlier, at a moment when she was tired of being alone, but no longer believed in grand promises. Victor was steady in a way that felt rare. He showed up when he said he would. He listened. He did not flinch when she told him she already had a child. He spoke calmly about responsibility, about family, about building something that would last. When they married, Marina believed she had finally chosen right. They moved into a modest apartment and made it their own. Victor worked long hours, but he came home every night. He talked about plans, saving for a bigger place, giving the children stability, making sure Marina never had to worry the way she once had. When Anthony was born, Victor held his son with quiet pride, as if the child confirmed everything he had believed about himself. Years later, Natalie followed, small and loud and demanding. And Marina felt certain that whatever hardships lay ahead, they would face them together. From the outside, they looked like an ordinary family. Not wealthy, not impressive, but intact. Marina did not see the cracks forming beneath the surface. Or perhaps she saw them and chose not to look too closely. Victor grew more distant after Natalie's birth, his absences explained away by work, his distracted silences justified by stress. Marina told herself this was what adulthood looked like. That love matured into routine. That trust meant not asking too many questions. She would learn how wrong she was only after it no longer mattered. The accident happened on an ordinary evening. Victor never came home. A call arrived instead, formal and precise, delivered by a stranger's voice. Marina remembered the sound of it more than the words. The disbelief that followed, the numbness that made it possible to stand, to dress, to answer questions she did not fully understand. Victor had died in a car crash on the outskirts of the city. The days after blurred together. Paperwork, funeral arrangements, children clinging to her, confused and frightened. Marina moved through it all on instinct, holding herself upright because there was no alternative. It was only later, after the condolences thinned and the casseroles stopped arriving, that the truth found her. Not from Victor, from someone else. She learned about the affair piece by piece, each detail heavier than the last. It had not been a brief lapse or a moment of weakness. It had been ongoing. Years, perhaps. The woman had been a constant presence in Victor's life, hidden carefully behind routine and excuses. Worse still, Marina discovered that her mother-in-law had known. Margaret Collins had known everything. When Marina confronted her, grief still raw and unprocessed, Margaret did not deny it. She sat rigidly in her chair, her hands folded, and spoke in a low, tired voice. She said she had tried to stop him, that she had begged Victor to think of his children, that silence had seemed like the lesser evil at the time. "You didn't tell me," Marina said. Her voice sounded unfamiliar to her own ears. "You let me live like this." Margaret looked away. "It wouldn't have changed anything," she said. "It would have only hurt you sooner." The betrayal settled deep beyond anger. Marina left that conversation feeling hollowed out, stripped of the version of her past she had believed in. Victor was gone, and with him went not only her husband, but the illusion that had sustained her. Grief turned bitter. Trust dissolved into something sharp and dangerous. Financial reality arrived without mercy. Victor had been the primary earner. His death benefits were modest and temporary. Savings disappeared quickly under the weight of rent, food and medical expenses. Within a year, Margaret suffered a stroke, sudden, severe, and life-altering. She survived, but the woman who had once been independent and commanding was left partially paralyzed, unable to walk without assistance. Marina became her caregiver by default. Days were divided between work, children, and hospital visits. Nights were spent managing medications, lifting and cleaning, learning how to care for a body that no longer cooperated. Hiring help drained what little money remained. Marina told herself it was temporary, that things would stabilize. They never did. She returned to work out of necessity, taking the hotel job because it was available and reliable, not because it offered dignity or growth. Each paycheck disappeared as soon as it arrived. Repairs were postponed. Needs were prioritized ruthlessly. Wants were abandoned altogether. Years passed this way, one after another, wearing her down gradually but thoroughly. Marina did not heal. She adapted. She became quieter, smaller, more careful, and in that carefulness, something essential eroded. Now, sitting alone and waiting for Vera to come home, Marina understood with painful clarity how deeply the past still shaped her present. Every compromise, every silence, every exhausted decision had led her here, afraid, stretched thin, and uncertain whether she had anything left to give. Vera came home in the late afternoon, quietly enough that Marina almost missed it. There was no slam of the door, no sharp announcement of her presence, just the soft click of the lock and the sound of boots being set carefully by the wall. Marina stood in the kitchen, frozen, listening as if the noise might disappear if she moved too quickly. When Vera appeared in the doorway, she looked smaller than Marina remembered. Her jacket was damp at the hem, her hair tangled from wind and snow. She avoided eye contact, her gaze fixed somewhere near the floor. There was no defiance in her posture now, only a tense, guarded stillness. Marina felt a dozen words rise at once, questions, accusations, relief, but she swallowed them all. She had learned, through hard experience, when speaking would only make things worse. Instead, she nodded once and said quietly, "You're home." Vera nodded back. Nothing more. Anthony emerged from his room and stopped short when he saw his sister. His expression shifted from disbelief to relief in an instant. Natalie ran toward Vera without hesitation, wrapping her arms around her legs. Vera stiffened, then slowly bent down and returned the hug, resting her cheek against Natalie's hair for a moment longer than necessary. No one mentioned where Vera had been or how she had spent the night. Marina did not ask. She told herself there would be time for that later, if later ever came. For now, having her daughter under the same roof again felt like enough. The evening passed cautiously. Vera retreated to her room and stayed there for a while, the door closed but not locked. Marina listened for sounds, movement, music, anything, but there was only silence. She focused on the small tasks in front of her, washing dishes that were already clean, folding laundry that had been sitting untouched for days. When dinner time approached, Marina began pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, mentally calculating what could stretch far enough to feed everyone. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Vera standing awkwardly in the kitchen doorway. "I can cook," Vera said. Her voice was flat, almost unsure. Marina hesitated, then stepped aside. "All right." Vera moved with quiet efficiency, chopping vegetables, setting a pan on the stove. She didn't explain herself or apologize. She didn't need to. The gesture spoke clearly enough. Marina watched from the table, her hands wrapped around a mug, careful not to interfere. They ate together for the first time in days. No one spoke much. Anthony picked at his food, glancing between his mother and sister. Natalie chatted softly about daycare, filling the space where heavier conversations might have settled. Vera kept her eyes on her plate, but she ate steadily, as if grounding herself through the simple act. The silence was not comfortable, but it was peaceful, fragile. Marina felt as though one wrong word might shatter it. After dinner, the phone rang. Marina answered automatically, expecting another bill reminder or work-related message. Instead, a woman's voice introduced herself from a local restaurant downtown. Marina listened, her breath catching as the words registered. They had reviewed her application. They wanted to invite her in for an interview. Marina thanked her, wrote down the time, and hung up, her hands trembling slightly. The possibility settled in slowly, cautious and unreal. It was not a solution. It did not erase their problems, but it was something. She looked toward Vera's closed door and allowed herself, for the first time in days, to feel a small, careful hope. The snow began falling hours before Marina was scheduled to leave for the interview. Thick and relentless, the kind that softened the city while making everything more difficult. By early evening, Spokane streets were coated in white, traffic slowed to a crawl, and buses ran late or not at all. Marina stood by the window, checking her phone repeatedly, refreshing transit updates that offered no reassurance. She didn't own anything suitable for an interview, but she had chosen her cleanest coat and pulled her hair back carefully, trying to look composed. This job mattered, not because it promised comfort or security. Those were distant ideas, but because it offered the possibility of breathing room, a schedule that didn't bleed into nights, a chance to be home when her children needed her. When she stepped outside, the cold cut through her gloves immediately. Snowflakes clung to her lashes and melted against her skin. The bus stop was crowded, tense with impatience. Minutes passed, then more. A man nearby muttered that the route had been delayed again. Marina checked the time and felt her stomach tighten. She couldn't afford to be late. She walked a few blocks, hoping to flag down a taxi, but the street was nearly empty. The few cars that passed were already full, their roofs heavy with snow. She considered turning back, calling the restaurant to explain, but the thought made her chest ache. So much depended on simply showing up. It was then that she noticed the elderly man standing alone near the corner, hunched slightly, his coat thin and dusted white. He was staring at a bus schedule posted on the pole, turning the paper map over and over in his hands as if expecting it to change. "Excuse me," Marina said, stepping closer. "Are you all right?" He looked up, startled, his eyes unfocused and confused. "I'm trying to get to the train station," he said slowly. "I took the wrong bus. They all look the same now." His hands were trembling. Marina noticed how red his fingers were, how poorly his shoes were suited for the weather. The wind picked up, sending snow swirling around them. "The station's a few miles from here," she said gently. "You shouldn't be standing out in this." "I thought I could walk," he replied, attempting a smile that didn't quite form. "But I don't think I can anymore." Marina hesitated. She looked at the time again. The interview was less than an hour away. She reached into her pocket, feeling the thin fold of bills she had set aside for emergencies, money she had already mentally spent. A taxi passed at the end of the block. Marina raised her arm without thinking and waved. The car slowed, then pulled over. She opened the door and helped the man inside before climbing in after him. "Train station first," she told the driver, then gave the address of the restaurant. As the taxi moved through the snow-covered streets, the elderly man turned toward her. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I'll pay you back." "It's fine," Marina replied, though she knew it wasn't. "You just need to get where you're going." He shook his head, stubbornly. No, kindness should be returned. At the station, Marina helped him out of the car, making sure he was steady on his feet. He pressed a piece of paper into her hand, his address written carefully in neat, deliberate letters. "Please," he said, "let me make this right." Marina nodded, unsure whether she believed him, then slid back into the taxi as it pulled away. When she arrived at the restaurant, she was cold, late, and painfully aware of how much money she had just spent. But as she stepped inside, brushing snow from her coat, she felt something else settle quietly within her, a sense that she had done what she was supposed to do, regardless of the cost. She had no way of knowing then that the choice she made in the snow would not end at the train station, that it had already begun to turn the course of her life in a direction she could not yet imagine. The knock on the door came late in the morning, just as Marina finished rinsing the last plate and wiped her hands on a worn kitchen towel. For a brief moment, she thought she had imagined it. Visitors were rare. No one ever came without calling first. Another knock followed, firm, deliberate. "I'll get it," Vera said, already moving toward the hallway. Her voice carried a guarded tone, the kind she used lately when she didn't trust the world to behave predictably. Marina followed more slowly. Something inside her tightened for no clear reason. When the door opened, the cold rushed in first, followed by a familiar figure she did recognize, the elderly man from the night before. This time he was dressed warmly, in a thick coat and sturdy boots, his posture more confident, his face clearer in the daylight. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said gently. I came to return what I owe." Before Marina could answer, she noticed the second man standing just behind him. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair touched faintly with gray at the temples. His coat was expensive but understated, his expression tense, as if he were bracing himself. Marina's breath caught. For a second, the hallway blurred, the walls seeming to narrow. Her pulse roared in her ears. Nicholas Lawson. The name surfaced instantly, violently, dragging 20 years of buried memories with it. College lecture halls, late-night walks, the certainty of first love, the kind that feels permanent because you don't yet know what permanence costs. She hadn't seen him since he vanished from her life without explanation. "Marina," he said quietly. Her name sounded foreign in his voice, heavier than it should have been. The years between them pressed into the silence. "Yes," she answered, though it came out barely above a whisper. The elderly man looked between them, confusion flickering across his features. "You know each other?" "We did," Marina said, forcing her voice steady. "A long time ago." Nicholas stepped forward cautiously, as if afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly. "I didn't know it was you. When my father gave me the address, I didn't expect." Vera cleared her throat sharply. Marina turned. Her daughter stood just inside the doorway, arms crossed, eyes darting between the men and her mother. She didn't say anything, but her posture was alert, watchful, instinctively protective. "Please," Marina said at last, stepping aside. "Come in." They gathered in the small kitchen, the space suddenly too crowded, too intimate. The elderly man placed an envelope on the table. "That's the taxi fare," he said. "Every $1." Marina nodded, though she hadn't invited them here for repayment. Her attention kept drifting back to Nicholas, his hands, his eyes, the familiar crease between his brows when he was thinking too much. "I'm glad you're all right," Nicholas said, breaking the silence. "My father told me what you did. He could have gotten seriously ill out there." "It was nothing," Marina replied automatically. "It wasn't," he said firmly. "Not to him." Vera shifted her weight. "Mom," she said slowly, "who is he?" The question hung in the air, sharp and unavoidable. Marina swallowed. "This is Nicholas Lawson," she said. We knew each other when I was young." Nicholas's gaze flicked to Vera, lingering for a fraction too long. Something unsettled passed through his expression. Calculation, recognition, uncertainty. "How old are you?" he asked before he could stop himself. Vera frowned. 16. The room went very still. Marina felt it then, the quiet, terrifying alignment of numbers, dates, memories she had locked away for survival. Nicholas noticed her reaction, noticed the way her shoulders stiffened, the way she avoided his eyes. "No," he said slowly. "That's not—" "Yes," Marina interrupted, her voice calm but edged with steel. It is. The elderly man looked from one to the other, alarmed. What is she saying, son? Nicholas didn't answer immediately. His face had gone pale. He looked at Vera again, really looked this time, the shape of her eyes, the line of her jaw, features that suddenly felt familiar in a way that couldn't be coincidence. Vera's bravado faltered. What are you all staring at me for? Marina placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, grounding herself as much as Vera. We're going to talk, she said quietly. All of us, but not right now. Nicholas nodded, struggling to breathe evenly. I never knew, he said. I swear to you, I never knew. Marina met his gaze at last. There was anger there, and pain, but beneath it, something else, truth. I believe that, she said, but believing doesn't erase the past. Outside, the snow continued to fall, indifferent to revelations and reckoning. Inside the small apartment, time seemed to fold in on itself, the present colliding with a past that had never truly stayed buried. The door had opened, and there would be no closing it again. The truth did not arrive all at once. It came in fragments, in pauses heavy with breath, in sentences that started and stopped as if the words themselves resisted being spoken. They sat at the kitchen table long after the tea had gone cold. The elderly man, Nicholas's father, kept his hands folded, eyes lowered, sensing that this was a moment he could not interrupt. Vera stood at first, restless, then finally dropped into the chair beside Marina, her posture tense, defensive. Nicholas spoke quietly, as though raising his voice might shatter what little balance remained. I didn't disappear because I wanted to, he said. I was sent away. My mother told me you'd betrayed me, that you'd chosen someone else. She took my phone. She controlled my mail. I was young enough to believe her. Marina listened without interrupting, her face still, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles had gone white. When I finally realized something was wrong, Nicholas continued, I tried to find you, but you were gone. Not at the university, not at the address I knew. And then years passed. I convinced myself that if you wanted me to know, you would have found me. Marina exhaled slowly. Your mother came to me, she said. She offered money. She demanded I end the pregnancy. When I refused, she threatened my future, my education, my job prospects, my ability to survive. And she followed through. Vera's head snapped up. You were pregnant, she asked sharply, then froze. With me. Marina nodded once. Yes. The word settled into the room like a weight. Vera stared at her mother, then at Nicholas, then back again, as if trying to rearrange the faces into something that made sense. My entire life, Vera said slowly, I thought I was unwanted, that my father didn't care, that he chose to leave. Nicholas's voice broke. I didn't know you existed. The elderly man looked up at last, stunned. A granddaughter, he murmured. All these years. Marina closed her eyes briefly. I raised her alone for years. Then I married Victor. He was good to her at first. He tried. But the truth is, Vera always felt like she didn't belong. And I didn't know how to fix that. Nicholas leaned forward, his hands trembling. I should have tried harder. I should have questioned my mother. I should have fought for the truth instead of accepting the version that hurt the least. No, Marina said, her voice firm. You should have, but so should many people. Responsibility doesn't disappear just because the past is complicated. Vera stood abruptly, pacing the narrow kitchen. Her face was flushed, her jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. So all this time, she said, I hated you, she turned to Marina, for being weak, for choosing the wrong men, for making us poor, for being tired all the time. And the truth is you were just surviving. Marina didn't respond. She waited. I told myself you were the reason I had nothing, Vera continued, her voice rising. But I never stopped to think what you'd lost. She turned to Nicholas. anger flashing through her grief. And you show up now? After 16 years? After everything? Nicholas nodded slowly. I deserve that anger. Vera's shoulders began to shake. I thought if I was cruel enough, strong enough, independent enough, it wouldn't hurt. That if I acted like I didn't need anyone, then no one could abandon me again. Her voice cracked completely then. She covered her face, sobbing openly. The sound raw and unfiltered. Marina stood and crossed the space between them, stopping just short. Vera, she said softly, look at me. Vera didn't at first. When she finally did, her eyes were swollen, red, stripped of all pretense. I was wrong, Vera whispered. I was horrible to you. I said things I can't take back. I wanted you to feel as small as I felt. Marina swallowed. I know. You shouldn't, Vera said, her voice shaking. You shouldn't know. A mother shouldn't have to understand that kind of cruelty from her child. Marina reached out then, placing her hands on Vera's arms, not to pull her close, not yet, but to steady her. I won't pretend it didn't hurt, she said. It did, deeply. But I won't pretend I don't see where it came from either. Vera nodded through tears. I'm sorry, she said. Not because everything's suddenly okay, but because I don't want to be that person anymore. Marina held her daughter's gaze. We don't erase the past, she said. We learn to carry it without letting it poison what comes next. Slowly, Vera leaned forward and rested her forehead against Marina's shoulder. Marina wrapped her arms around her, not tightly, not triumphantly, but with a quiet, deliberate care. Across the table, Nicholas watched in silence, knowing this was not his moment to claim anything. The truth had surfaced. What came next would take time, boundaries, and patience. Nothing was magically repaired. No promises were made, but something essential had shifted. For the first time, the truth was no longer buried. And for the first time, Marina and her daughter were standing on the same side of it. The phone rang in the early afternoon, just as Marina finished folding a load of laundry that still smelled faintly of detergent and winter air. She hesitated before answering, a familiar fear tightening in her chest, the reflex of a woman who had learned to expect bad news more often than good. Marina Collins, a woman's voice asked. Yes, Marina replied, steadying herself. This is the manager from the Willow Street restaurant. I'm calling about your interview. Marina closed her eyes. We'd like to offer you the position, the woman continued. The schedule would be 2 days on, 2 days off as discussed, if that still works for you. For a moment, Marina couldn't speak. Her hand trembled slightly as she pressed it against the edge of the table. Yes, she said finally. Yes, that works. Thank you. When the call ended, Marina stayed where she was, phone still in her hand, letting the reality settle. It wasn't wealth. It wasn't rescue. It was simply a chance, something she hadn't allowed herself to hope for too strongly. She looked around the apartment. It was the same small space, the same worn furniture, the same unresolved problems waiting quietly in every corner. But something fundamental had changed. That evening, they ate dinner together again. Not ceremonially, not as a symbol, just 4 people sharing a meal. Vera helped set the table without being asked. The younger children talked over each other, arguing about a movie they wanted to watch later. Marina listened, occasionally smiling, occasionally correcting them, feeling present in a way she hadn't for a long time. Nicholas wasn't there. He had left earlier, respectfully giving space where space was needed. There were no promises yet, no clear definitions of what role, if any, he would have in their lives. Marina appreciated that more than grand declarations. Some things had to grow, slowly or not at all. Trust, she knew, could not be demanded. It had to be earned in quiet consistency. After dinner, Vera lingered in the kitchen as Marina washed the dishes. There was an awkwardness between them, not hostility but caution. the kind that followed honesty after years of misunderstanding. I'm not fixed, Vera said suddenly, staring at the countertop. Marina nodded. Neither am I. Vera exhaled. I don't know how to be different, but I want to try. That's enough for now, Marina said gently. Trying is enough. Later, when the apartment finally grew quiet and the children retreated to their rooms, Marina stood by the window and watched the snow outside. The city lights reflected softly against the white streets, blurring the edges of everything hard and sharp. She thought about the elderly man at the bus stop, about the taxi she nearly couldn't afford, about how close she had come to choosing only herself that night, and how choosing kindness instead had changed everything. Not instantly, not magically, but meaningfully. Her life was still complicated. Money would remain tight. Vera's wounds wouldn't disappear overnight. Healing would be uneven, slow, sometimes painful. There would be setbacks. There would be days when Marina would doubt herself again, when exhaustion would creep back into her bones and the mirror would feel unforgiving. But now there was truth instead of silence. Her children knew where they stood. She knew where she stood. And for the first time in years, Marina felt that she was no longer simply reacting to life. She was choosing how to move forward within it. Family, she realized, was not defined by perfection, not by wealth, not by the absence of pain. It was defined by accountability, by staying when leaving would be easier, by endurance, by the quiet courage to choose kindness again, even after being hurt, especially after being hurt. As Marina turned away from the window and switched off the light, she understood something with sudden clarity. Doing the right thing does not always reward us immediately, but it often returns unexpectedly, quietly, through doors we never planned to open. And sometimes what comes back is not a solution, but a beginning. For those listening, what does forgiveness mean to you when trust has been broken? How do parent-child wounds shape the adults we become? And have you ever experienced how a small act of compassion changed your life in ways you couldn't foresee? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear.